And they actually did greet him that way, by the way, in Babylon. He was greeted as a changer of all the old ways, the Persian ways, which were good, but they were also corrupt and cruel in many ways. So Alexander if anybody who betrayed him, as I say, he went after him. He stayed after Darius. The whole point of that story, it's complicated, is that he stayed on Darius's tail for 3 more years, taking him out of the center of the empire. Instead of consolidating his rule in Babylon, he went after Darius in the northwest of Afghanistan and so forth, because if he did, he had to have the throne legitimately by destroying Darius. And Bush, of course, instead of going after Osama, which is what he said he would do, he never did. He went and did a diversionary tactic behind him. Alexander would never have done that, you see. With Alexander, he would have chased a mountain bandit for a year if necessary. If the guy hid up in a mountain fortress, Alexander would lay siege to that fortress for months if necessary. He would win. And it's important to realize that was his strategy. He never lost a battle. So that's how he became a legend in his time. He never lost. I made a point of it with the elephant charge at the end, based on a real story, which is that he could not lose this battle. When he saw his men being defeated by the elephants, he's the only one who charged. And it's based on a true incident that is an amazing incident at Multan in India, when there was a fort they were attacking. The men were listless, they wanted to go home. He jumped on the wall with 3 bodyguards, and he jumped into like 100, some say 1,000 Indians by himself. He jumped over the wall. The men looked at him, he jumped over the wall. Alexander had finally gone and jumped, and he was committing suicide. So they all changed their mind, and they charged over the, true story, charged over the fort, destroyed the whole village. Alexander had been mortally wounded with an arrow into his lung, like in the movie, and barely survived.
What are some of the things about Alexander's life? I mean, obviously, a lot of it we saw on here. Is there anything from Alexander's life that you're fascinated by that didn't make it to the screen?
Oh, yeah, so much. There's the story of the oracle in Siwa, when he went to find out if he was the son of God. There's the great story of his marriage to Sissy Gambus, not Sissy Gambus. The Sissy Gambus story was the older lady, but the daughter of Darius was called Satara, and the other wife. The marriage of the 80 nobles. He married 80 of his finest troops to 80 of the Persian women. The march through the desert, which we show briefly, of course, is a saga unto itself. His heroism at that point was amazing. His stories of his personal dignity in the most direst, he really he was destroyed by the floods and by nature. It was a horrible experience. But, that's late in the movie. It takes so long, I just want to get to the end. Mm-hmm. I, of course, am fascinated by the fact that he died 8 months after Hephaestion died, leaving his second son there with Roxanne to meet a very sinister fate because they weren't protected. He must have known that. So, in other words, those last few months are so strange. Hephaestion's death is so sudden. Alexander's death is so bizarre. Motives are there. It's another. I didn't want to dwell too much on conspiracy. I'm not doing the Kennedy movie here, but the concept was that, something is askew, and I think I tried to show that on the night of the drinking the wine, that he was looking at Cassander, and he looked at Ptolemy. He looks at Ptolemy in a certain way, and Ptolemy has a weird look on his face if you look closely. And then, of course, towards the end, we cut to the real old Ptolemy who's saying, we killed him. So, the idea was that there was consent at that dinner party. Because the dinner party is a very strange story. Medius, there's two potential examples of poisoning in those last 11 days. And the behavior of Ptolemy was in charge of his security. And there's all kinds of questions that don't get raised in the normal history books.
So how much footage is there for, say, this is the 10-month version. I find it interesting, actually, that when you're referring to these two versions, you're referring to it not so much as the theatrical and the director's cut, but the 7th-month version and the 10-month version.
Well, that's more literal. It's more accurate, because I don't know I still don't. Maybe it'll be a 5-year version.
That's what I was going to ask you.
10-year, if anybody's interested.
Or maybe even a miniseries, how much material did you shoot that is still in the vault that could be in yet a different version?
We always keep our secrets. Yeah, there's, who knows? Life changes. We'll see. We'll see. Alexander is probably out of vogue right now. You have to be a certain type to understand or care about him. But I think he's well, you asked about young people, whatever the people, why now? Because he's so different, that's why. There's nobody like him. He's original, he's unique. Nobody like Alexander. And no one had fortune favors the bold. He, all through history, has been regarded by Napoleon, Caesar, Marcus Aurelius. Homage has been paid by writers, numerous books, Afghanis, Arabs, Persians, not the Zoroastrians, but Persians, Indians. He always comes up again and again. In fact, his reputation was better with the Romans than it was with the Greeks, and the Romans brought him back. But also, you have to remember that he's in the Quran too, as one of the prophets before Muhammad. So he was accepted by the Arabs and the Persians, and to some degree by some Indians. Chandragupta in India, some 50 years after his death, took his idea of unifying all these warring tribes in India and made it a nation. He was very influential in history, still is. But he's so different than today. He's so not a media bite, but he did it. He was a frontline, the people say, I read critics that said, how do men follow him? Why would they follow? The guy is fighting in the front line at the Battle of Gaugamela. What general fights like that in the front line and actually was nearly killed several times, had 8 wounds? He was a leader by example.
I want to shift gears here and get into the casting. And this actually brings us to our first audience question from Morena Elias. Where are you, Morena? Stand up, please, so our team can get you a DVD. Where are you? Way in the back there. Was Colin Farrell your first choice for the title role? Actually, you'd mentioned at some time that Tom Cruise was under consideration.
That was 10 years earlier. We don't have a script, though. No. This is not, we're going back now to 2001. Briefly, Heath Ledger was in and then out. He had done The Four Feathers, and he had doubts about Alexander. And then Colin came in, right? That was the first time I met him. I loved him. He was a bit rowdy, but we eventually got him around to a screen test, and I like Colin very much. He's got something unique. He's bold in the Irish way that some Western actors are not. He's got a true strength and courage that people perhaps don't see underneath the blonde locks, but he's a strong kid. He's a scrapper. And I think Alexander was small, but he was definitely known as a scrapper. He was a guy who never gave up. He's the kind of guy you don't want to get in the ring against. Also, Colin has that same dangerous side that Alexander must have had. I think tremendous love of excess.
What kind of training did he have to go through? One of the things that fascinated me about this film was the recreation of all those ancient weapons and all the training that your principal cast and the extras had to go through in order to look realistic in that. How long did Colin and Lito have to train to be able to master that?
Well, there were different areas. We sent them to Spain to learn horsemanship from the best guy we could. Then they went on to Morocco, where they was trained under Dale Dye. But they already trained with him in California. So there were 3 or 4 phases. And Colin is a natural athlete. He also knows how to ride a horse. From the Western, he did American Outlaws. So he got better. He's a hell of a rider, hell of a natural. He's a soccer player, so he's got great thighs and legs, great legs, by the way. I don't know if you saw them. In the bulls scene, especially. But he's a hell of a good athlete. And he took a fall, as you know, a few falls, as well as breaking his leg late in the film.
So he did a lot of his own stunts then?
He did a lot of his own stunts. We wouldn't let him do some because of insurance reasons, but he did a lot of dangerous stuff. I mean, that's him on the horse on a lot of this stuff, fighting.
And what about some of the rest of the casting? One of the things that I noticed is that, like so many directors, you seem to have kind of a repertory company of actors that you like to work with a lot. For example, Val Kilmer, you've worked with several times.
Well, Val's, I think, a very fresh choice. I mean, he's not the typical English older man that you'd kind of get in that role. I just liked it. I think he was ready. Val is the right age. He's perfect for Philip. He's 44 years old. Philip had a hothead reputation, was a great, I mean, they talk about Alexander. Philip was so much more libidinous than Alexander ever was. Alexander was restrained compared to his father, who liked it both ways, obviously. And Val was just ready to go. He'd just do anything. He's Jim Morrison. Jim Morrison we referred to Alexander. And it's so funny that he comes back as a father.
Who are some of the other actors that you like to work with a lot?
I like actors when they fit. You know, it works best. No, it doesn't matter. I'd work for the devil, with the devil, rather, if he was right for the role, I guess, you know. I mean, yeah, I think there is courtesies and you go past a certain point. It's not fun when a star is being a star instead of an actor. It's only fun if you have an actor, but if he's an actor, he's dedicated.
How about Angelina Jolie, and especially working with all the snakes in that film? She had not worked with snakes before, had she?
She loves snakes, doesn't she? She loves all that kind of scorpions and snakes and knives. She's a strange girl. And I gather an exciting one. But she is she loved it. She wanted more. She loved it. And by the way, it's not exaggerated. You know, my mom loved French poodles for some reason when I was a kid. And the French poodle was always in the bed. It was always there instead of me. So, you know, I can understand the mother having snakes around. It was also, and this is definitely recorded as a fact, that it was said she kept the snakes in the bed to scare Philip off, because she didn't want him in the bed. But snakes were around. I mean, that was their culture. She was from a snake cult in the northwest of Greece.
When you're working with an actor, especially some, you know, and you've worked with obviously some very talented actors, what's your process in helping them create the character?
Process? Inch by inch. You know, it's like studying it, rehearsing it, a little bit of research, a little bit of intuition, having fun in the rehearsals, working at something. And sometimes they're on their own. An actor will go off and read something that will affect him a certain way. In an Anthony Hopkins situation, which is a very complex story to an Englishman playing an American, he related most to Nixon's famous gestures. This thing. So when he lost himself, he would often go back to the physical, because the physical would get him back into the emotional, intellectual. Sometimes that works. Other people attack it cerebrally. Other people come at it emotionally. Some people, like Colin, I'd say, would do it blindly with instinct sometimes.
How much improvisation do you have on your sets? Especially with a film like this that's so technically complex. Are you a real stickler about having your actors stick to the script? Do you encourage a certain amount of improvisation?
No, not at all. I've always been able to rewrite and the beauty of the filmmaking process to me is that you narrow it down. You get to the essence, hopefully. So that by the time you come to the set, you're reducing the script to its minimal working area. And then if you have, for example, a 15 or 25 shot list for that day, if you can figure out while the day is going on that you can do it in 12 or 7, wow, it's exciting. Then it continues to grow. And then the editing room is another booby trap. You know, it's another thing that goes. So it's a twisty labyrinth, but hopefully you come out with a thread at the end.
If you weren't locked into a specific release date, which I know you were in this case, ideally, how much time would you have liked to have cut Alexander?
No, I can't.